there are two Asian Americans fighting for a new seat in the Congressional House of Representatives. So there's Jay Chen, the Democrat, and then the Republican incumbent, Michelle Steele, who's Korean. Last month, she sent out several mailers of Jay Chen holding Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, and across the room, there are faces of Bernie Sanders.
Icon.
And the Black Power symbol and the Chinese flag. It's just like a hodgepodge of everything remotely left.
I feel like it's a hodgepodge of everything that like boomer Asian parents hate. You know, like you mentioned Black Power, like that's she's like targeting like the racists the most.
Yeah, it's like the Asian conservative boomer starter pack. It's just all these
Welcome to the Politically Asian podcast. We're two Asian American comedians talking about politics and the Asian American community in hopes of getting more Asians to talk about politics. We're coming at you live from Brooklyn, New York. My name is Jerry Lim. My pronouns are they, them, and you can find me across the internet at Jerryaki. That's Gerrieyaki. And my co-host...
Hey, my name is Aaron Yin. My pronouns are he, him, and you can find me on social media at Aaron Flarin. That's AARONFLARIN.
Cool. Well, we're going to open up this episode with our Practice What You Preach segment. On the pod, you know, we talk a lot about politics, and that's the theory aspect, but it's also important to do things. So each week we share one thing we did related to politics and organizing. I'll go first this week. This week, I mailed in my absentee ballot application. Woo!
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I am still registered to vote in the state of Alabama. I mean, it would be nice to have impact on, you know, local elections here in New York, but I feel like it would be more important in more, you know, in Alabama. So, yeah.
Nice. Is your district in Alabama, is your district a purple district, or is it also pretty red?
Okay. Purple. It's a purple district, maybe blue on like a good day. I feel like there's only 3 barely blue districts in Alabama, and that's Jefferson County, Montgomery, and possibly Mobile or Huntsville. I'm not sure on that third one, but yeah.
Nice. That's cool. So you sent something in, they'll mail you a ballot back, and then you'll fill it out?
Yeah, so I just sent in my application, so hopefully it gets there on time, because I have to send in like my ballot, like I think it has to be mailed 5 days before, so I'm just like, when is this gonna come in? I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, New York midterms are coming up too. I gotta get on that. That's good though. Local elections matter more.
Yeah, I mean, So I wanted to vote in this election specifically. I spent like a couple of hours on Ballotpedia. I feel like there's a lot of things up for election this cycle: Senate, House, Governor, State Senate, and House, blah, 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 blah. But what really got me off my ass was my partner sent me an Instagram post. So social media works. And it was about a amendment, I think. They're basically updating the state constitution because, fun fact, the state constitution still says stuff about like slavery and segregation and interracial marriage and poll tax. And they're basically voting to remove this stuff about slavery.
In like a revisionist kind of way, or like a we should have fixed this a long time ago?
No, we should have fixed this kind. But see, the thing, so I think I would have genuinely failed out of law school because I had to reread the clause like 5 times, and it all hinged on this word "except." Right? It says prohibit slavery and indentured servitude, and I was like, oh, why are we removing that? Like, I feel like that's something we should continue to prohibit.
Yeah.
But then there's a clause that says prohibit slavery and indentured servitude except when it's used as punishment. I was like, what the fuck? That's so sneaky.
Oh, wait. I remember reading about this, right? Because Alabama is one of the 5 states voting on prison slavery still.
It's always one of the 5 states voting on prison slavery. It's Alabama.
I'm like, I'm like, wait, why is this familiar? It was also one of the things we could have potentially talked about. That's so exciting now. Wow, I forgot about that. It was like Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, and
Yeah.
two other states. Wow, yeah, prison slavery, big, yeah, still very much a thing in America right now.
Yeah, and it was pretty wild because I was reading on Ballotpedia, and even like Republicans are like, "Yeah, we should update this. This is not good."
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Well, very proud of you for doing local election stuff.
Thank you. Are
doing
you
your,
are you
duty.
registered? Are you registered in Arkansas or here?
I'm registered in New York.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think if I had to choose, also the city where I'm from, Little Rock.
Yeah.
The entire city and all of its districts are pretty blue. Little Rock is one of the few blue cities in all of Arkansas. It's like a blue dot surrounded by red all over. So I feel like in this case, my vote may matter a little bit more in New York City. It's hard to tell, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. Voter turnout in New York is pretty dismal, so congrats.
Yeah.
What about you? What were you up to this week?
Yeah, so as with every Sunday, I'm coming back from Mocha Picket, but this week the new thing that I did was I had a smaller meeting with some members of Youth Against Displacement to talk specifically about ways we can bring more people on board. I was actually thinking a lot about you and how you went to DSA and they had like a big meeting and there was like PowerPoints and structure and we were all talking about that within YAD, YAD, and we were like, that's not really our style. We're more of a, I think our strength is always showing up in person. Like no one does boycotts like we do. No one does picket lines like we do and rallies and continuity over time. So we were just talking about ways to bring more people into these big or small in-person things and then just have ways for them to talk with us afterward, one-on-one, or get a meal right afterwards. Because all of the people in this group already, that's how they got involved.
Yeah.
And that's what made them stick around for like 2 years, 3 years. Just that kind of one-on-one in-person thing right after an action, as opposed to like, let's all meet here. We're going to go over PowerPoint for 1 hour and then come back.
Okay. Well, I will. One of the things that I took away from college, which is not much, but it's you need two things to have like a full meeting. Is one, you need a physical space to actually meet, and two, free food. That always gets people to show up.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And we have, I guess, the space is the Chinese Staff and Workers Association. We got a big, nice room. And a lot of the, former Jingfang workers do cook lunch for us after the picket. So that satisfies condition 2. The meal really does change things. I agree with you there. Like it's like it really helps out with bringing people in and you just chat for like a few hours afterwards.
Yeah, that's how you reel them in, and then you keep them in with theory, obviously.
No. Just show up and because at first we were like, do we do big open houses? Should we put together a slideshow? And then we just talked about it more and how we just asked several people how they got involved, and no one got involved through like a PowerPoint type present open house type thing. Everyone came to a picket and then wanted to get even more involved, and so they came to lunch and then talked and like. We're like, let's just build that out more.
Interesting. So what ideas do y'all have in mind for that? Because it sounds like you need people to like pick it with you before really.
Yeah. Well, we do have an email form. And even though we don't promote that form at all, it's a form for getting involved. People still fill it out.
Oh.
And so we've been emailing them being like, hey, thanks for being interested in YAD. We're so excited. Let's meet at the picket line in real life so we can learn more about you. We can talk afterwards and go from there.
Okay, I hear that. I feel like my feedback, and like, I mean, I'm not involved, so like, take it as you will. But I feel like my feedback, also just like taking the experience of my 1 month in DSA is sometimes I think that can be intimidating for people to show up just at the picket line, like straight from the get-go. And, they might not have like the primer or like the know the entire context of like what you're doing, so they just might be like, well, you're asking me to go out, or like you're asking me to leave the house. Like I don't really understand why we're doing this at the picket line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's less the case because the form's only available on the Instagram page.
Okay.
And anyone who follows the Instagram page sees like that's all we kind of post about, whether it's
Okay.
Mocha or Two Bridges. So yeah, normal if this was a form in the void, I would understand, but I think they see all the pictures and videos beforehand, so they know exactly what the picket line looks like every week and what we're chanting and all that type of thing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But yeah, that was me.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get into the news this week. This week, well, it's not really Asian American news, but since I brought up elections, I feel like we should talk about what's happening in the UK right now. The UK has a new prime minister of South Asian descent, and he is the first Asian, really first person of color to be prime minister of the UK. His name is Rishi Sunak. And yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, every single article about this has been mentioning POC versus Asian. So this, to me, I read this like this is the UK's Obama moment.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Like they have their first non-white person. And in this case, Rishi is also the first Asian person at the same time. Well, I will say the articles that we've been reading, the CNN article, I think highlights how I feel about this. The CNN article's title is Rishi Sunak, the super rich former banker who will be the first person of color to lead Britain. It's like he's a super rich guy who also happens to be POC. I'm more skeptical because I think that means that he'll be out of touch.
Yeah.
Separately, I was like, okay, his name could be Rishi, but have a dollar sign instead of the S.
Like
he has so
Kesha?
much money. Yeah, like Kesha, because he has so much money. Yeah, that initial thoughts. A super rich guy, like, good for you for diversity, but the super richness is not helping.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think this is like a slightly different CNN article that I'm pulling this quote from. Sunak's wealth and right-wing politics means he is far from representative for British Asians. There's this good quote that I think is like really, really encapsulates like what we try to talk about here on the pod. What I see in Rishi Sunak, first and foremost, is an incredibly privileged person with enormous wealth and with access to education and resources that the majority of South Asians in the UK don't have. And so I have far more in common with working class white politicians than I do with Rishi Sunak. This was a South Asian psychologist professor at the University of Bristol.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's a great folk. Yeah, not all skin folk are kinfolk. He's super rich. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, exactly.
And I forgot to mention, I'm glad you did, that he's also conservative, right? Britain's run by the Tories right now, which are just, Republicans of the UK. But yeah. Yeah. I guess while we're on this topic, some people might be wondering, how rich is he? So Rishi, he's married to someone who's the daughter of the founder of Infosys. And Infosys is a big IT company in India. It's worth like I think 100 billion. The point is like they're really, really rich, and that's how he has a lot of his net worth. There was one article saying that his net worth is about 826 million, which is twice the net worth of Prince Charles.
That's insane. Like
Yeah.
I don't, because like those are the people who like colonized the world, right? Like that's the royalty, UK royalty, and you're literally like wealthier than them.
Yeah, you're richer than royalty. That's wild to think about. Also, is it King Charles now?
I don't know, dude. I don't care. Like I literally, the thing I hated the most about this, having to do this piece, not having to, but like covering this piece was that I had to fill my brain with so much knowledge about the UK. I was just like, all right, y'all use the U in some spellings. Like what is this? Like he graduated with the first. What the fuck is a first? It just means he graduated with honors. PM versus MP. Shut up. Shut up.
Yeah. It is King, but yeah, I mean, one thing that I did not know was that this guy has tried running for PM a few times. So he was actually part of the movement to get rid of Boris Johnson. And it worked. They kicked out Boris Johnson. But then he was supposed to be next, but then he got beat out by Liz Truss, who now left. And so now Rishi finally got in line.
Yeah. Okay, the Tories had to pick between being like sexist and then racist and then, I don't know. That's how we ended up here.
Yeah.
What else is there to know? I saw that his parents are one is a doctor and one is a pharmacist. Though with the NHS, I mean, I imagine they make still a fair amount, but I imagine it's probably not at the same scale as it would be here in the US. But more importantly, he is pro crypto and NFT.
Oh, that's a funny side. I didn't even know that. That's funny.
I don't like it.
Well, Britain's economy, to use their word, is shite right now. That's so funny. Absolute shite. Yeah. That's
Bloody
so
hell.
funny. Bloody hell. This wanker right here. Our economy is absolutely shite because of Liz Truss, high inflation, 10%, strikes in different labor industries. Yeah, anyways.
All right. These accents are reverse hate crimes.
Yeah. Some people might be like, okay, Rishi's rich, he's conservative, but what's his track record for dealing with poor people? And one thing that I read, it's an article from The Guardian. The title is Lack of Help from Rishi Sunak for Struggling UK Families Will Push 1.3 million people into poverty. So this was before he was elected. This was back when he was on Boris's cabinet. Mm-hmm. The summary is that Rishi's whole thing is like, let's lower taxes a bit for the rich and then not increase any spending for like pensions and social security. So all the people being pushed into poverty are the old and retired people. Like this whole pension thing was a big deal for all the articles I was reading. So very anti-poor, anti-elderly, anyone on retirement, essentially.
See, that's annoying because I remember reading an article somewhere that's like, oh, he has a background in like finance, economics. Like he's going to turn this around when he very clearly has a track record of not doing that. So I don't know. The other thing about all this UK knowledge, I still couldn't figure it out, still couldn't understand it 100%. But an article said that he definitely didn't win by a formal election of the people. So that's strike one. And then he didn't technically win an election within the party. It was just that the other people who were running to replace Truss in that like special election or whatever dropped out. So he won because he was unopposed.
Yeah,
I don't know why they dropped out, but yeah, that's
he won by default.
So it's not even like, the British people chose this South Asian man. No, they had no one else.
Yeah, I'm sure many people don't like him. In that same article about the pensioners, he's interviewing a lot of old people on Social Security. They're in hospital beds, and literally this old white British woman was also criticizing Rishi there for the same pension thing. So we'll see how it goes. But Rishi seems very classic, classic Tory, classic conservative, very much like as long as we lower some taxes, the wealth will kind of trickle down and help all the old and poor people.
Which is wild because I read a thing that like I don't know her first name. Truss was like believed in the same principles like trickle down economics. But after 7 weeks and seeing that it wasn't working, she's like, all right, I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You're right. We'll see.
The last joke I was thinking about, whenever I see a crazy rich Asian, I just always think crazy rich Asian. Well,
they do have a South Asian version of Blink Empire now on Netflix. I saw. I forgot what it's called. I was
like Bollywood something.
But no. I don't know. It's something South Asian, but it's about like rich South Asian people. But I can't remember what it's called. So I will come back next week having finished watching it probably.
To make an infographic.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Let's move on to our next topic. So the next thing we're talking about is the Supreme Court in America. So the Supreme Court declined to take up the effort to secure birthright citizenship for American Samoans. Mm-hmm. Jerry, what is one thought you had about this piece?
Researching for it, I just didn't understand why the U.S. would invent such a category, like why they would bother with inventing U.S. nationals, like why not just have citizens and non-citizens? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can get into that.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I guess before that, though, I don't know what you knew about this place, but my first question was like, where the hell is American Samoa?
The Pacific.
Yeah. It's a Pacific island, and it's a lot closer to Australia than America. It's like pretty close to Papua New Guinea, the Philippines.
Cool.
It's twice the distance. It's like the distance from California to Hawaii times 2. So it's just like
Oh.
even further out. That's why it's so close to Australia. And I'm like, this is so weird how the U.S. owns it.
Yeah.
And in classic American fashion, like the reason why they have that is because there's a naval base there.
Yeah.
They have the Navy and the Air Force, and it's like classic. That's, monitoring what's going on in Asia kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to answer your question, this thing all started with a policy called the Insular Cases about 100 years ago. So back then, right after the Spanish-American War, Congress was deciding which territories would be incorporated with America, like Hawaii, and which ones wouldn't. And it was really controversial because it's racist, essentially. They were like, which islands have the more civilized, good non-white people?
Oh, no.
And which ones have the bad ones? And the bad ones were like, not made fully citizens, and then the good ones were, made fully citizens.
Holy fuck. Of course the answer was racism all this time.
Yeah. I mean, basically America was like, who is the model minority out of these Pacific islands?
That's pretty wild because I was reading about it and they said U.S. nationals, like, yeah, they can't run for office or vote. And then like some articles were like, in some states you can't even be certain professions. Like there's like one state out there that was like, yeah, you can't be an optometrist if you're not a citizen. Like, what is that?
Yeah. I guess for context, there's about like 3.6 million people like American Samoans who are part of these U.S. territories that just are treated like second class U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And so the American Samoans are very mad that this case was declined again.
Yeah, and it's wild because like I was reading the ACLU, they covered this in 2020 and they said that more American Samoans died in Iraq and Afghanistan at a higher rate per capita than troops from anywhere else in the US, which I thought was like wild. Like, that's awful.
Yeah, I mean, you're also literally doing everything that is, quote, American. Or like you're serving troops and then you're still not considered a citizen.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. But the courts are saying that American Samoa has to vote to be given that birthright citizenship thing.
Oh,
so like,
okay.
if you're born in American Samoa, you would be a citizen. That has to be voted on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I found an article from 2019 that talked about why some American Samoans did not want this citizenship. Some Samoans argue that if they gain citizenship, they have a unique status as indigenous people. And they argue that becoming citizens could eventually lead to the loss of their indigenous political system, their land rights. The way the Samoan people divvy up their land is it's given to you by your family. It's passed down by generations. And to be a U.S. citizen is at odds with the cultural political system that their ancestors passed down to them. So I thought that was really interesting. And I wonder, since they are Pacific Islanders and way out there, I wonder like if this is a case of like, oh, we're only hearing, like as outsiders, we're only hearing about, oh, Samoans want to be citizens, but they can't. But then like actually it would be more progressive for them to like not become citizens. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I remember there was a similar thing that I saw about that. My question was like, why not just split off from America? Because it seems like all you're getting is a naval base that you may not want, and you're not given any rights in America anyways. I'm kind of confused, like what the benefit of even being an American territory is. Like, I can see there are benefits that come with being a U.S. citizen in terms of like jobs or healthcare or certain other things, but right now, when you're in this limbo state, it's like, it seems a little, I'm like, what do you have to lose by leaving?
Yeah, that's fair. Hey, thanks for listening to the episode so far. If you like it, maybe pause right here and give us 5 stars on either Apple or Spotify. It really helps the pod out, and it's free. But if you have some money to toss our way, consider subscribing to our Patreon. We're currently fundraising to get transcripts for our podcast episodes to make them more accessible, hire a video editor, and hopefully get Canva Premium to deliver better memes. So yeah, thanks for listening. And now back to the episode. So, moving on to our next topic, it takes place in South Korea. And we want to acknowledge that last night there was what's being called a stampede, a Halloween stampede in Itaewon. And over 150 people died, even more were injured. But we're choosing not to cover that since that happened literally last night and we haven't done enough research and we're just kind of waiting for more news and details before covering that. So our story for our third article of the week is about how Paris Baguette, a 23-year-old worker, was doing the night shift and was crushed by a sauce mixing machine. Her colleague found her body and they were asked to continue working next to it. Yeah, Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is also traumatic as fuck.
Yeah.
I was reading the Wikipedia paragraph on this. Like, the group that owns Paris Baguette is called SPC Group, which stands for Somlip General Food, or the S stands for Somlip. But yeah, originally they made them work right next to the machine and they just put a barrier next to it. Sort of, Christ. I was like, oh, if you put a barrier in front of it, did it really happen? Like, kind of thing. Like you know how kids, when you cover up something with a blanket, babies, they don't have object permanence, so they think it disappeared. It's like the similar thing. I'm like, you just put something blocking it, and they were like, keep working, and that sounds traumatic as fuck. It also made me think about Amazon workers who couldn't stop their work while their coworker was having a heat stroke and a heart attack. Yeah, very similar traumatic moments of being near the site of like a coworker death. Just terrifying.
Yeah, it's especially gruesome to think about. Like, I know some of the protesters are saying stuff like, we won't eat bread that's been flavored with the blood of our coworker or something like that. I can't quote it word for word, but like, I feel like that really encapsulates just like how gruesome and awful this accident was, right? Like, she fell into a food processing machine. Like, I would feel like the place needs to like shut down and just like, like really just clean the place up, make sure everything's good to go again, and like, do an investigation so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's within this incident alone, there are so many very bad moments. So for example, at first the company was saying, oh, she had a coworker with her. And they were standing together, but then this ended up not being true because other workers were testifying that she was alone in one section of the place and the coworker was in a separate place. So a lot of, when I read that, I'm like, okay, a lot of corporate PR trying to change the narrative of what happened already, and it's truly the workers who are actually there having to speak up and clarify things so that the company doesn't, try to clean themselves up this incident ASAP.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that I've heard people who are in unions talk about, or like in the process of organizing their union talk about, is like the idea of like not closing shop alone, not being alone in the shop, just because even if you're working like a storefront, for example, if you're the only one and there's like a sketchy character around, you don't want to like expose yourself or be vulnerable. And it's wild to think about that in the aspect of like safety. Yeah. This was a wild ride from start to finish, because if you've ever been to Paris Baguette, first off, I don't know why they're called Paris Baguette, because their food, have you ever eaten at Paris Baguette?
Yeah, dude? I didn't even know they were Korean until this article.
How did you not know dude, they serve red bean bread, mochi donuts, curry croquette. Like, I swear to God, I have seen pork floss bread. Like, they weren't, really? You couldn't, maybe not Korean, but like, you could tell they definitely weren't. You couldn't tell they were French. Come on.
Yeah. Well, with this incident, it also opened the floodgates, is that the right word, for other accidents. So I was reading also the Wikipedia paragraph, but on October 24th, it was revealed that the SPC group also had more than 100 industrial accidents per year logged with the Korea Occupational Safety and Health Agency. So it's like, this is the one that made the news. But there were at least 100 previous worker-related accidents that happened that I guess were death-related or something, or maybe they made local news. But I'm like, this place has been bad for a while.
Yeah, I mean, talk about like spooky haunted places, but I read one article that was like, oh, a week before that worker passed, another worker's hand was caught in another production line.
Yes,
Yeah, and not sent to the
too.
hospital because they have this like whole thing about like hiring, I think it's like the equivalent of like gig workers, like most of their bakers are subcontractors and not technically like full-time employees or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was yeah, just really wild. It was really wild to see that this like because there are several Paris Baguettes here in New York, and like they're like cutesy and like and it's just wild to see like the sheer amount of like labor disputes and like labor disasters and like bad workplace things that they've had.
Yeah, that's the most insidious kind of workplace where they have a
Where they're
nice,
cute.
where they're cute but they're like killing workers and harming workers in the background.
Yeah, did you read that there was this a couple of articles from like 2018 that talked about how of the company's bakers of the company's workers that were pregnant, half of them suffered from miscarriages, which I feel like we've talked about pretty recently. Like it's still like I don't think it was at the same rate as like that nail salon worker, but it's still over like the 10 to 15% that we talked about.
Yeah, I had no idea that, but in the Vice article covering this, they did mention that 80% of Paris Baguette bakers are women. So
yeah,
that may be a reason. But yeah, this article was also just saying how these workers, they aren't guaranteed 1 hour lunch breaks. They aren't given annual paid holidays and menstrual leave. It sounds like this one death really opened the gates for every previous complaint as well.
Yeah. I think their latest movement was in June of this year. They had a 53-day long hunger strike. And I just want to point this one out because I imagine it must be so hard to do a hunger strike when you work in a fucking bakery.
Yeah.
It smells so good in there.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
man.
like you mentioned right now, there are people calling to boycott Paris Baguette. And one question that I have is, what is their hard line for when to end the boycott? Because, like in New York City, we had a boycott in front of Kam Hing Bakery because the bosses of Kam Hing Bakery in New York City stole over $1 million from workers. So our boycott's like, we will boycott until you pay the workers back the $1 million. But in this case with Paris Baguette, it's like, how long will the boycott last? Like, what are the demands? Because otherwise, I'm sure SPC Group is like, just wait it out for 3 weeks and they'll be gone.
I imagine it would be until like their demands were met, right? Like the sick days and 1 hour lunch break or whatever else they're asking for, right?
That was actually for something separate. That was a separate protest back in May. This workplace death related thing, I haven't actually seen any demands. Like on the workplace side, they said like, we pledged around $60 million to upgrade our safety so that this doesn't happen again. But like, I'm not sure if that's satisfying for the people there or if they want more. But that's just something I didn't really find. But I'm like, unless a boycott has these kinds of demands, I'm sure the overall company is just like going to hold it out for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and then I want to point this out. So they said that the SPC, which is the parent company, also operates like companies or chains like Shake Shack, Dunkin' Donuts, and Baskin Robbins. And I want to know if like, does a boycott extend to those too? Or is like, how does that work? So, yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. So we're going to California, specifically Orange County. So over there are two Asian Americans fighting for a new seat in the Congressional House of Representatives. So there's Jay Chen, the Democrat, and then the Republican incumbent, Michelle Steele, who's Korean. And this is a very historic time because their district is new. It's 37% Asian, and it was made specifically during redistricting to bring together like Vietnamese people, Chinese people, Korean people, Indian people, and give them a stronger voice in Congress. But this election, and the reason we're covering it, to me, it's so funny because all that's happening is they're each trying to prove how American they are. And Michelle Steele specifically has been going really hard on the "you're a communist" line all the time. Jerry, what is one thought you had about this whole election?
Bad. Bad. Yeah, I feel like just to distill it down to one thought is like kind of hard. I don't like, obviously, it's bad that she's doing that, but I don't know. Like, people outside of Asians, like, can't tell us apart, nor do they care to, right? So, like, there's a chance Michelle Steele, could go to some other part of America and, like, someone else will call her a communist, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Dude, this election is like so funny to me because, for example, when we have a white candidate running against an Asian person, we kind of expect the white candidate could be a little racist and be like, "Oh, you're Chinese, you're a communist spy." Da 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 da. But in this case, where there's two Asian people, the same shit is happening. That's so fun.
I mean, like Asians hate other Asians, like that's how it is, like, back in the continent. So, like, it's kind of funny to see it play out here too.
Yeah. I mean, the main reason that Michelle Steele is doing this is because her district, it's 37% Asian, but half of those 37%, so I guess like 18.5 are Vietnamese specifically. So she's doing a lot of this, calling Jay Chen, "Oh, like, you're a communist, you're a Chinese spy," to try to pander to that Vietnamese vote. She's like counting on their anti-communism because Little Saigon is in her district.
Yeah, I mean, like, the approach worked for her in the past. I was, like, reading about how she got her seat in, like, 2020, and, like, apparently she managed to link her opponent to, like, some video or something like that where she praises Ho Chi Minh, like the communist leader. And even though, like, her opponent, like, made multiple attempts to be like, "I have denounced that," like, that was, like, whatever, deep fake, that opponent lost a seat.
Okay, yeah, so she's trying it again. I mean, she's tried it a few times. I forgot what year this was, but she was running against 2020, when she was running against the broader Democratic candidate. Yeah. It was a white dude, and and she had campaign flyers just showing him with, like, a drawing of Mao Zedong and
wow,
and saying he was soft on China. So it seems like China's her shtick in general. But this thing is just so funny to me because every article covering this is like, "Oh, Asian Americans, we're so excited to have a more nuanced discussion on Asian American between two Asian candidates. We're going to break past all these stereotypes." And Michelle's just, "You're a communist, you're a Chinese spy." It's so funny. Like, everyone's so annoyed by this, and it's like, we had higher hopes for you.
I feel like that's a common tactic, though. Like, I feel like there was another Korean politician who said more or less the same thing. Like, she was like, these Chinese people, they come over here and bring disease. Coronavirus is their fault. Like, it was... And it's just like, like, if you guys, like, they can't tell us apart. Like, no one's gonna know. You guys got to stop saying stuff like this.
Yeah. And for Jay Chen, I guess we can go to Jay for a bit because, like, both candidates are just trying to make themselves seem more American. It's like perpetual foreigner on steroids. Like, they're each calling each other the perpetual foreigner. And Jay's whole shtick is like, "I served in the army. I'm like a U.S. Navy reserve officer. I've been to Afghanistan," which I'm like, I don't think that's a flex either, but it's like,
I mean, you said they were trying to prove who was more American. And if it's, what's more American than either A, calling someone a communist and, decrying against them, or B, serving in military imperialism?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, I don't think this is the way Asian Americans in Orange County wanted this to pan out, Like, no one's talking about Asian American poverty or even hate crimes. It's just, if I didn't know the race of these two people, it sounds like two white people arguing with each other.
Oh, for sure. I will say what sucks for him, though, like, I just know, like, he's like punching the air, not getting sleep over this, is because, like, he was talking about, like, how he's like, I think it's, like, really stupid that she calls me a communist. Like, my grandmother fled communist China for Taiwan. I have so many relatives that are still living there, and, like, she calls me a communist. And I was like, that's pretty bad. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think Michelle's a little worse, and it's also, I mean, I have more sympathy for Jay just because Michelle's already elected. Like, she's currently in the House. You're currently in the House and you're doing this shit. I'm like, come on, Michelle. The funniest thing I wanted to share is like I cannot overemphasize how hard Michelle's going in on the whole communist angle, but last month she sent out several mailers of Jay Chen holding Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto in front of a children's classroom and across the room there are faces of Bernie Sanders
Icon.
and the Black Power symbol and the Chinese flag. It's just like a hodgepodge of everything remotely like left.
I feel like it's a hodgepodge of everything that like boomer Asian parents hate. You know, like you mentioned Black Power, like that's you she's like targeting like the racist, you know, like you know what I'm talking about? Like she's targeting the racist Asian grandparents, parents, whatever. Like she really just picked like what aggravates these people the most.
Yeah, it's like the Asian conservative boomer starter pack. It's just all these it's just so funny. Every single time I read this article, I just crack up because of like what the election could have been.
Yeah,
and what it is. It's just so fun.
It would have been so cool to see like a nuanced discussion between two Asian American politicians, but alas, it's just name calling, which, you know, like I said, is more American than anything else. Do you so there was like I know nothing about this group. They're called the Asian Americans for Good Government Political Action Committee. Long name. And you know, they endorsed Michelle Steele, but they withdrew the endorsement and they said that she was, quote, red baiting, which okay, and saying that she undermines AAPI unity. Do you feel like AAPI unity is like a thing that will happen? A thing that exists?
I mean, I think in this case, when they say Asian American unity, they mainly talk about unity between the East Asians, because ever since Michelle Steele made those comments, like tons of Chinese and Chinese American groups specifically, like there's another group called like the Group of 100, which includes a lot of the Chinese scientists who were, you know, prosecuted for the China Initiative.
Oh, right. They
were also calling her out. So I think when they mean it's undermining AAPI unity, it's mainly, I think, they're talking between East Asians.
I was just going to say it's sad because, like, you know, when I think of like, oh, trying to do Asian American unity, it's like the whole, you know, back in whenever the term was invented, it was about like learning about like South Asian issues and Southeast Asian issues. But like now it's in like 2022, it's like, oh, the East Asians can't even agree on anything.
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, that group, I've never heard of that group, the AAG. I'm not
whatever. Yeah.
They should have just said Chinese or Chinese American, because like Michelle's comments are very pointedly targeting Jay Chan's ethnicity. Like, you know, Taiwanese, Chinese. Like she's not caring about anybody else. It's literally just Chinese or Taiwanese.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say on this is like part of her platform is about, you know, high taxes and like fighting high taxes, right? And like ask any Asian parent and they hate taxes. They hate taxes. They're like, what am I doing this for? Which is, I will always say, like, it's so funny to me that like they're like, oh, we came to America for a better life, but we don't want to pay for it though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so true.
Man. All right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to our last topic of news. The Supreme Court is poised to ban affirmative action after hearing arguments next week. Vox put out a good article about Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's thoughts on affirmative action in the Constitution. It's a pretty dense article, pretty dense topic. So I guess, Aaron, you just go ahead and pick where you want to start. Yeah,
one thought. So, you know, just for some background, you know, for listeners, you know, Asian people and affirmative action, very much like peanut butter and jelly, these two issues. like we are covering this early, okay? Because there are two cases. Like the Students for Fair Admissions is the main group you need to remember. Like they're, you know, leaning conservative, but they're the one challenging it. So they're the Students for Fair Admissions. They have two lawsuits, one against Harvard, one against UNC, University of North Carolina. So that's just all background. Just keep this in mind when it happens, like in a month or two. But yeah, I guess my first thought is when reading the Vox article, I didn't really realize that when arguments are made, even at the Supreme Court level, there's a lot of cherry picking when it comes to cases, right? Like, because like this whole affirmative action thing and whether it's legal or not legal rests a lot on how you interpret this specific line in the Constitution about being colorblind and providing equal justice. And so the conservatives are like, when they see the equal justice line, they're like, oh, that means that there's no race-based thing. And then the newer Supreme Court Justice Jackson and other, I guess, more liberal, they're like, judges, they're like, no, it means we provide laws that bring people to the same level. So it's like two different interpretations. It's like one is like, oh, we don't do anything for a cross race, and the other one's like, no, we need laws like affirmative action to level things out.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about like that article being dense, because like it was like outlining Justice Jackson's position about like, oh, well, the 14th Amendment was specifically about making sure that, you know, people who had been discriminated against, you know, formerly enslaved black folks were equal to everyone else. But everyone else at the time really just meant white people. And so, you know, I would go on to say like I feel like many parts of the Constitution and all that distinctly say white citizens. So how can it be colorblind? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in that article, why I mentioned cherry picking is that they have very few lines where someone said a certain phrasing in a previous Supreme Court ruling that made it seem like they were going towards the colorblindness.
Yeah.
But there are many, many more examples of the contrary that are pro-affirmative action. And so that's what I meant. Like this made me have a little bit lower respect for the Supreme Court overall, because like it's truly like it's like what happens in Fox News opinion political commentary, right? Like you're cherry picking certain things to fit a larger narrative. Even if the evidence is small, you're still building it up, and all the conservatives will still side with each other, then all the liberals will still side with each other. It's not as balanced as I thought the Supreme Court would be around this kind of issue.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I don't like the idea of like sticking too closely to a document that was like written a bajillion years ago, you know? Like I know a common argument for the whole Second Amendment right to bear arms thing is like, oh, the founding fathers wanted people to have guns for whatever reason, the right to bear arms. But, you know, the definition of what is a gun has, you know, arguably changed over time, because if you brought an AK-47 back to like the 1700s with the Revolutionary War, that would be not a gun. That would be like a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just, I mean, overall, the articles were saying, it seemed like the articles are saying that the conservatives' interpretation is not grounded in much support, but because they have the majority right now, it will swing that way most likely, which is like, that sucks ass.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, you can follow the podcast at Politically Asian Podcast on Instagram or at Politic Asian Pod on Twitter. If you really want to help us out, please it just takes 5 seconds. It's free. You just tap, literally tap once, maybe twice, leave a 5-star Apple or Spotify review. And that really helps us out. Cool. Thanks for listening, and
bye.